Our next speaker is Nan Ellin. She is Director of Urban and Metropolitan of the Urban and Metropolitan Studies program at Arizona State University, where she is also an associate professor in the School of Public Affairs. She's the author of the books Postmodern Urbanism from 1996, with a revised edition that came out 3 years later, and of Integral Urbanism, a 2006 book. And she's also edited some volumes, including Architecture of Fear from 1997, and as a contributing editor, the 3-volume Encyclopedia of Urban Studies that's coming out in 2008. She also has recently collaborated with Edward Booth Cliburn on a book called Phoenix, 21st Century City. And it's about that she's going to talk to us today, the strengths and opportunities that she sees in Phoenix, presumably in the same way that Sean sees snow as our strength and opportunity. Nan, you're going to look to sun as the solution for Phoenix. So welcome Nan Ellin, whose talk is titled Inspiring the City.
Well, it's great to be here in Syracuse with all of you in this terrific panel. This is the subject of the symposium is something I'm really very passionate about, and I want to thank your wonderful Dean, Mark Robbins, for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here. Get the slides up. And yes, I'm going to talk about Phoenix. I've been thinking a lot about Phoenix and Syracuse since I've been here. Syracuse shrinking, Phoenix expanding. Syracuse has snow. We have sun. Syracuse has too much water. We don't have enough water. Yin and yang, Syracuse and Phoenix. And the topic, as Jonathan said, is inspiring the city. When I got to Phoenix after living in cities such as New York and Paris and Madrid and Cincinnati and Baltimore and Los Angeles, I encountered this urbanism of red tile roofs that we're so familiar with, images of Phoenix. We are a city that is sprawling. As everybody knows very well, we're moving out a half mile along the edge, a half mile a year. We're growing at the rate of 1 to 3 acres an hour. That's in terms of size. In terms of population, our population is expected to double to 7 million in the next 20 to 30 years. Phoenix and Tucson are just going to merge together into one huge conurbation. They're calling it the Sun Corridor. And so this is some images of the edge. We've also got these incredible mobile home parks that people appropriate and are very proud of, as well as RV parks we have. We're famous for our retirement communities like Sun City. And then we've got those mid-century vintage areas that Mark Robbins spoke about. But all of this is located, that was kind of the built environment. What's the physical environment where we're located? It's this incredible, majestic desert landscape. It's the greenest desert in the world. People think of a desert, they think of sand dunes, but it's not like that. It's very green, it's very, very fertile. And here's some images from looking from on top of the mountain from dawn to dusk down into the valley. We call it the valley because it's ringed by mountains. It's quite spectacular. But what has been happening to the downtown as we've been sprawling? We have been neglecting and abandoning our downtown. As you look at this is the downtown right in the center here. Look at all the brown. This is area that is vacant land. The vacant land is not amenities. This is not parks. It's really just messy areas that are not developed. And this, by the way, is the airport. So the airport is just 5 minutes from the heart of downtown. That's a great asset. This is what it looks like from a bird's eye view. We're looking straight up Central Avenue here. And right here is where the ASU downtown campus is. My office is right in there. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about what's going on with the ASU downtown campus. And on the ground, this is what it looks like. So we've got neglected and abandoned warehouses, strip malls. Those are the empty lots, look like that down on the left. And the more recent corner, 13-acre type strip malls, lots of abandonment. And here, look, this is an image I took in 2002. Look at this area, what was going on there. It's like little houses. They were all rented. They were all displaced. Phoenix hired a relocation agency. And this is what it looks like right now, okay? So I'll go back. You see the pyramid building in the center. You see the S-shaped road. Now, this I just took last week. This is obviously not the final version. This is going to be a bioscience, biotech campus. So it's a city, private-public partnership to build something here. Now it's serving a lot of parking lots, but this will change. So 2002, 2007, we are in the midst of this tremendous growth, tremendous boom in terms of population and in terms of what's going on in our downtown. Now, next year, this is what is supposed to happen. This is all almost finished. Our light rail, our first line of the light rail is opening next December, okay? We've got all this other stuff happening, and ASU, as I mentioned, ASU is one of the largest universities in the country. We have about 65,000 students on our Tempe campus, but we are supposed to be growing at the same rate of the state because we're a state university. So we're projected to grow to 90,000 students in the next 20 years. And one of the ways of doing that is to build another campus, and that's the downtown campus. So we're expected to grow to 8,000 by next year. And then if you look, I don't know if you can see that on the bottom, 15,000 students by 2015, plus lots of other stuff is going on. It's tremendous. And this is what it looks like. We're surrounded by cranes. We've got journalism school going up right next to my school. I'm in the School of Public Affairs. Right next door, this one, is a Stephen Ehrlich design building. We've got residence halls going up. It's just tremendous. Now, in my book, Integral Urbanism, okay, I wanted to mention, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do now. And I say I construe construction. Construction is about putting things together. Construing is about interpreting or translating. What does this all mean? And that's what I do. That's my practice. And in addition to translating construction and what's being built, I also aspire to translate, and I don't know how well a job I do, but I try to translate what's happening in academic work for a larger public. So one of the things I try to translate is my own work, and my new book, Integral Urbanism, is really about how to make our cities better. This is the book I've been wanting to write for a very long time, and I was finally able to write it. My earlier books were really about figuring out what the problems are, what are the issues. And then I finally got to a place, so if the city's an organism and I'm the doctor, urbanist as doctor, I first had to make the diagnosis, and it took me about 20 years to do that. And then I got to a place where I felt like, okay, now I can come up a little bit with some prescription, and that's integral urbanism. So what I did for integral urbanism is I looked at best practices, what I consider to be best practices since around 1990 around the world, mainly Western Europe and the United States. And I wanted to learn from these. And I didn't want to drag and drop. I don't believe in copying what's happening in other cities. So I didn't want it to be a book about case studies. Oh, they do it well in Portland, they did a good thing in Denver, they did a good thing in Bogota. I didn't want to do it that way. So even though I include examples so people can see how they're manifest, what I really did was I distilled all of these examples into 5 qualities. So what are the 5 qualities that these great practices all share? And these were the 5: hybridity, connectivity, porosity, authenticity, and vulnerability. And in the book, there's a chapter on each. I combined hybridity and connectivity into one. And I'm not going to talk to you in depth about the book, but I just want to show you one little technique I used in there. Because for the book, too, I wanted it to not just reach an academic audience. So after I wrote the whole book, I rewrote the whole book in about 1,500 words. That's the size of 2 op-ed articles. And worked with graphic designer and architect Barbara Ambach, and she designed it. So the first 20 pages of the book are like a little cliff notes of the rest of the book for people who don't want to read the whole book and they just want a little summary. And it's completely fine if they don't go beyond the summary. So this is it. Just look at some of the main concepts of the book in here. Another reason I did this is I wanted to demonstrate the concepts of integral urbanism. So I wanted to show as well as tell. And I realized if I just wrote it, I wouldn't be demonstrating the concepts of integral urbanism. But this précis does. Each page combines people, architecture, technology, and nature. And that's one of the themes of integral urbanism. And integral urbanism, I should say, is not something I invented. Integral urbanism is happening. It's a very exciting thing that's happening. And all I did was give it a name. But what I'm talking about is a movement that I see happening out there that's a very interesting and very exciting movement. Integration. Okay, so as I said, I aspire to inspire. And one of the big themes of integral urbanism that I try to translate to the larger public is that you always begin with your strengths. You always say what is important here, what is valued. And this is something Sean Hurst talked about. People really care about what's important and what's valued. And the modern period had this notion that things are a tabula rasa, and you come in and there's a blank slate and there's nothing there. And there are other things that went along with that notion of the tabula rasa. All of this led to many, many problems. What the integral urbanists are doing, and this is many people, and they don't call themselves integral urbanists, I do, but what they do is they come in and they say, what do you value here? Everyone knows what they value. We have local experts. They are experts. They know what they care about, whether it's nature, whether it's a building, whether it's a neighborhood, whatever it is, they will tell you because they know. You start there. You say, what do you want to preserve? You don't say what you want to preserve. You just say, what do you want to value? What do you value? And you make sure you preserve that. Inevitably, as you're talking about what do you value, people will say, well, you know, we have this park, and it would really be good if only we had more shade, or if only we had an amphitheater. So you'll get to the second thing, which is enhance. So you start with preserve. We love this exactly the way it is. Don't touch it. Then we'd like this, but it would be better if, and that's enhance. And then the third thing, and you do it last, what don't you have that you want? So architects and planning departments and mayors are worried a lot about environmentalists who come to the fore and preservationists who come to the fore. And they think they're very pesky, and they say, you know, they are such a pain in the butt because we have this great plan. But the preservationists are saying we can't tear that building down. And the environmentalists are saying we can't tear those trees down. But what if you ask them first and you save those, and those become the germ of what is to come? So this is the theory of integral urbanism, and that's Phoenix down there looking from the mountain. So I've been writing for the Arizona Republic, and what I write about, I've tried to figure this out for this talk because I never was asked to talk about this before, so this was interesting for me. I provide overviews of what is happening, and so hopefully what Dean Rubin was asking for, people want to know. Give me a summary. They can't read the reams and reams of plans, and they don't know what's going on. So in 600 words, I try to summarize what's happening. I also really try to identify the strengths. What are our strengths, whether they're people, creative capital, intellectual capital, our majestic landscape, our institutions like ASU and others? What are our strengths? And then I also look at where other people are doing it well, where we could learn from. These two are really important. I try to act as a watchdog. You know, we have lots of really good ideas and initiatives and plans, and we hire consultants. And then there's this very bizarre amnesia that sets in. I don't know why. I don't know if it's worse in Phoenix. Maybe it's the sun. I don't know. But people forget. And so I remind them and say, you know, we were doing this great thing, or these consultants came along with this great idea. Let's move forward. And then the last thing, and these are kind of connected, I advance specific proposals and say, this is important. This is something I think we need to do. So this is an example of a column I did that really summarizes the concepts of integral urbanism in a short article. And this one summarizes the concept of authenticity. I tried to translate it for general public. So I say we seek authenticity in a place, just as we'd rather slip between all cotton rather than polyester blend sheets at night. And as current sheet trends suggest, The higher the thread count, the better. Just as higher thread count improves the comfort and quality of our sheets, so higher urban thread count improves the comfort and quality of our cities. So I just tried to translate that. And this one is more of a cheerleader, city booster thing. This is Phoenix's moment. This is what I'm saying here. And here I'm talking about the architecture, saying, people from all over the world, we get calls all the time. Show me around. I want to see all the fabulous architecture that's happening. So I say, taking cues from the desert itself, much of the finest architecture and urban design here embraces a combination of boldness and restraint, of showmanship and modesty, combining primal instinct with technological acumen. Local designers divine the thread linking traditional and modern. Then there was a vision. This is where I act as a watchdog. And one of the themes I thought was really important that came out of this vision was the connected oasis. And I felt that the rest of the plan should hang itself on the connected oasis. And so I wrote an article saying, the plan was good, right? I always start with the strengths. But, it would be stronger if it had a name. Why don't you call it the Connected Oasis? And that's actually happening right now. And then I said, let's let the rest of the plan hang on the Connected Oasis, which is a series of connected parks that run throughout the city. And this is another take on that, put nature back in our downtown. So, we're ready? Okay, I'm just going to finish up here. And this is a piece of it called Phoenix Flows, where I talk about the importance of water. We are an oasis in the desert. We're not just in the desert. This was the water that ran through it. And so I proposed this new initiative to bring water back in a completely sustainable way. And this is a magazine that I did with my students, Shade Magazine. This was the big party we had. I create happenings around these events also because I think that's important. It's about the public discussion. And finally, just the book that Jonathan referred to, Phoenix 21st Century City. I'm just going to show you a few images. Again, this is a kind of cheerleading. We have talent here. We have great architecture, great art, great fashion design, great performance art, Taliesin West. This is Will Bruder project. And finally, I just want to show a project by a local artist named Matt Moore, who grew up on this farm. And so it's just to end up where I started with that growth out there. He lived on this farm, but now his parents are selling it to a developer. So he actually planted the plan of a suburban house into the field there. And here is the actual plan of the development that's going up at 1/3 scale. He planted it with, this isn't fully grown yet, but the houses are planted in red sorghum, so they'll look like red tall roofs. And then the streets are planted in black wheat, so they'll look like black asphalt. Thank you very much.
Should I mute? Thank you, Nan. I think if you haven't heard already, you'll discover during your time here that it turns out that Phoenix and Syracuse must be sister cities, because not only do we have the water that you guys need and you the sun that we desperately crave, but to your connected oasis, we have also, as you have no doubt already heard, the connective corridor, exploring some of the same strategies and responding to some of the same concerns. So thank you for sharing that with us. Our last speaker on this panel, before we climb up here and have a discussion, is Christopher Hawthorne, who is the architecture critic for the Los Angeles Times, a columnist for its Sunday magazine, and who has previously written for Slate, for Metropolis magazine, and the New York Times, with his writing appearing in many other publications, ranging from the New Yorker and the Post to New York Magazine and Architecture Magazine. He's also the co-editor and co-curator of a book and a show on the Greenhouse, New Directions in Sustainable Architecture. His columns in the Los Angeles Times, or his articles, have covered architecture from a broad range of perspectives, writing about new buildings and architects, but also about the photographers like Julius Schulman or the critics like Herbert Muschamp, who help translate architecture in different ways to broader audiences. He's written about not only landmark buildings, but also new subway stations, the threat of wildfires, and different strategies we might choose for responding to it. Today, Christopher Hawthorne will talk about the new intensification of development in downtown Los Angeles and the way it's changing the approaches of LA architects and the characteristics of that city's distinctive architecture in a talk titled The Unprivate City, Los Angeles in Transition. Thank you, Christopher.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Mark Robbins and to Syracuse for inviting me here to speak. Can I just press this one on the right side? The top one? Okay. This is the pointer here? Okay, great. For inviting me here to talk about Los Angeles and about my approach to writing about Los Angeles. And I know you've heard a lot so far, so I will try to keep this very brief. And in fact, I may or may not get to the discussion of downtown, which is sort of at the end of my discussion. And as Janet mentioned, I will cut from the bottom depending on the time. So think of this as a series of snapshots of Los Angeles at a particular moment in its development and evolution, and also as a series of snapshots of how I approach the job of working as an architecture critic in that city. And I certainly think of my role as writing about more than just Los Angeles. I write about national, international topics as well, and feel lucky to be able to do so. But I have found that Los Angeles is the single most fascinating subject for me, and I think the single most fascinating city in the United States as a subject matter right now. And the history of Los Angeles and of Southern California as a whole is really, in many ways, a history of transitional moments. And the city always seems to be arriving at some momentous crossroads or racing towards some precipice of one kind or another. And I knew at least that much, if not a whole lot more, about the city when I arrived 3 years ago this fall to begin working as the architecture critic at the LA Times. And now, 3 years later, it seems very clear to me, despite having tried to keep that caution in mind, that the transition that the city is now going through is really in many ways a profound one, and maybe at the very least the first among equals among all those transitional moments in the city's history. And it's one, I think, that goes to the very heart of how Los Angeles not only is planned and built, but also how it defines itself to its own residents and also to the rest of the world. And the shift has also really offered me a way to think about how to organize my own thinking and writing about the city, which, for anybody who's spent a lot of time there, knows it can be a really elusive place to define and to categorize. And there are a number of ways to define and describe the change that I'm talking about, and it starts with a pair of pretty basic and interrelated facts. One is that the city and the region are gaining population, continue to gain population at a really remarkable clip. LA County, for example, is expected to add about 4 million people by the year 2050, which would take the population of the county to about 13 million. So, and then on top of that, the second fact is that the LA basin itself, although in terms of Southern California as a whole, sprawl continues to go north and east, especially beyond the mountains in the what we call the basin of Los Angeles. That growth has really found a physical limit in terms of the mountain ranges that surround that basin, and now, along with the suburban growth that continues on the outskirts of the region, there's also a lot of growth that is coming in the form of Los Angeles as a city kind of doubling back on itself. And that means, as I'm sure most of you know, that the city is is not only getting denser, but is really building, for the first time in its history, infill architecture at a really wide scale. but it's a very particular and I think even a peculiar kind of infill architecture that is unique to Los Angeles. And it means that this city, whose appeal and whose identity had always been so much to do with private space and private amenity, as perhaps best illustrated by that iconic Julia Schulman image of the Pierre Koenig case study house. That city is now, has a need for and a constituency for open space and park space and transportation infrastructure planning in a way that it never has before. And the most extreme, the most dramatic symbol of that transformation, I think, came last spring when hundreds of thousands of people marched in an immigration rights protest, both in downtown Los Angeles, ending up at the feet of City Hall here on the right, and also down Wilshire Boulevard. And here's another shot of those protests. And of course, LA, is reaching this point in its development in an era when the very idea of public space and public design in civic terms, in traditional terms, is really dead. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with that critique. It's now probably more than a decade old. So if Los Angeles is becoming a public city, if it's not becoming a public city because of that fact, it's at least becoming in all sorts of ways what I'd call an unprivate one. And oddly enough, LA is moving away from being a private city with the help of the private sector, like a lot of cities. So we're just moving from one kind of private to another in a way, because our large-scale projects, as in so many other places around the country, are now being shaped by private capital. And of course, it wasn't just the single-family houses in Los Angeles that had that kind of attitude about privacy. Even many of the city's public icons really display the same kind of attitude, the same reluctance to meet the city's gaze directly. This is the 110 freeway here running into downtown, and this, for anybody who knows the geography of Los Angeles, this is a row of palm trees that marks Dodger Stadium, a building, though it is one of the best examples of post-war California design, really shows no face at all to the public because it's tucked away in Chavez Ravine. And the apex, or maybe the last gasp of that approach, happened exactly 10 years ago with the opening of Richard Meyer's Getty Center. But lately, we have been discovering new icons more appropriate to the increasingly crowded and unprivate Los Angeles. This is the so-called Freeway House, or 101 House, which became something of a cause célèbre over the summer. Its owners were trying to move it from Santa Monica north of the city, and they changed their route because of traffic or for some other reason. They were carrying the house on a trailer, and as they were going through the Cahuenga Pass on the 101, they ran into an overpass. The house was knocked off the trailer and came to rest right on the shoulder of the 101, right in the geographical center of Los Angeles, essentially, and also on the shoulder of one of the busiest freeways in the entire country. And it stayed there for 11 days as Caltrans, which operates the highways in the state, tried to figure out what to do with it. And here's the view from inside the house. You can see its view through the bay window of the northbound 101. And finally, as I said, after 11 days, Caltrans got it together to remove that house, and it happened one evening, and the local news crews, which had been following the plight of the house, and it's sort of purgatory there on the shoulder, actually covered live, shooting down from a helicopter, its progress as it finally went under that overpass and north out of the city, I think in the direction of Santa Clarita. It was sort of a combination of the O.J. Simpson white Bronco chase and this old house. What the house leaves behind is a Los Angeles that is beginning to grapple with and get used to the idea of shared space. And that concept of shared space rather than public space has been one that's been very useful for me in organizing how I cover the city. And that's shared space in all sorts of ways, on sidewalks and buses and subways, in shopping centers and in apartment buildings. And our architectural icons, I think, really significantly are learning how to share space as well. And a few months ago, I was looking back at some of my pieces and realizing that a number of the ones that were not only the most prominent projects that I was writing about, but also the ones that I found the richest as subjects, had to do with these standalone architectural icons. And of course, for much of LA's history, that's all we had in terms of icons, were standalone ones that were being extended or restored or reconfigured or reimagined in some way. This is the Getty Villa on a site overlooking the Pacific, and it was extended by the Boston firm Machado and Silvetti, mostly by cutting some space into this canyon here and adding some new circulation and some other space, along with restoring the Getty itself. And also the Griffith Observatory, very much a kind of standalone icon, a lone wolf sitting in Griffith Park and overlooking the city. It was restored by Brenda Levin and then expanded by the firm Pfeiffer Partners, mostly again by digging underground on this edge and also adding some new galleries under that lawn that you can see there. Here's one more shot that gives you a sense of how detached it is in Griffith Park from the rest of the city. Another famous standalone icon, one of the most famous, Cesar Pelli's Blue Whale, the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood. The Blue Building here was the first to be built in the 1970s, really a great piece of architecture in its way, but very much a two-dimensional building, a very flat building, and sort of set down on this large site like a Monopoly hotel. And then the Green Building was added here in the 1980s, and now Pelli has designed a third building here, which is now finally under construction, which has been squeezed onto the northern edge of the site where a parking lot was. So you can see this sort of transition and how these three buildings have the different attitudes they have about sharing space and the idea of neighbors architecturally. Also the LA County Museum of Art, LACMA, where Renzo Piano, here's the site plan, is taking a collection of buildings on your right, and adding them to a building on the far west, the May Company building, adding two new structures. And even the new ground-up construction in the city shares some of these same hybrid and transitional qualities. I think it was Janet who mentioned Architectonica. This is a new transit-oriented development, and we do have those in Los Angeles along Wilshire Boulevard in Koreatown, a little bit east of LACMA, and it's located above a subway stop. It's a rental apartment building that has a number of low-income units. It's not a great piece of architecture, and it's rather cheaply put together, actually, but it's a remarkably rich subject for an architecture critic writing about the city of Los Angeles at this moment. This mural here that you can see is by April Greiman. It's a sort of abstracted image of a rice bowl. And it is visible really all the way down Wilshire to the drivers along Wilshire, which of course has always been the very center of car culture in Los Angeles, the so-called linear downtown of LA. And it's a mural that's lit up quite dramatically at night. And it also forms a gateway into the plaza that you can see there, which is not only the plaza for the residents of the apartment complex, but leads directly to the subway station below. So anyone who uses that subway station walks in and out of that plaza. And it is very much a hybrid project. I described it as the love child of the billboard and the piazza. And it's an architectural, it's an awkward symbol, I think, of an awkward moment in the development of Los Angeles as the city moves rather fitfully toward a denser and maybe a more transit-oriented future.